Dawn broke over New Dawn Outpost, humanity's most isolated and underfunded colony, on the fringe world, Helios 4. Amber light filtered through the dust-choked atmosphere, casting long shadows across ramshackle domes and rusted solar arrays. The metallic taste of processed air hung in the recycled atmosphere of the command center as Captain Mara Ellison peered over the latest supply, manifest her brow furrowing at the numbers displayed on the flickering holographic interface. 3 months, she said, tapping the projection. That's how long we have until the next supply drop. Luca Tran, the colony's chief engineer, leaned against the console beside her. His coveralls were stained with hydraulic fluid and the fine red dust that seemed to penetrate every seal and surface on Helios 4. We can stretch the water reclamation to 95% efficiency. Maybe 96 if I can scavenge parts from the derelict harvesters in Sector 4. Mara nodded, allowing herself a small smile. Luca's ability to wring function from the colony's decrepit systems bordered on miraculous. Do it. I want every drop accounted for. A subtle tremor rippled through the command center, rattling the array of mismatched mugs on a nearby shelf, tokens from Earth and older colonies, reminders of homes left behind. The lights flickered, dimmed, then stabilized. Third microquake this week, Luca observed, making a note on his handheld. The geological survey said the fault line was dormant. The geological survey also said this planet had viable agricultural potential. Mara replied, gesturing toward the nearest view screen, which showed the barren, rust-colored landscape stretching toward the horizon. The weak sunlight of Helios barely penetrated the ever-present dust clouds that scoured the colony's exterior surfaces. Yet here we are making it work. Luca's optimism, though pragmatic, remained unshakable. The command center doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, admitting Director Anna Jansen. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and deep lines framed her eyes, testament to years spent fighting bureaucracy for every credit, every shipment, every concession for her struggling colony. Captain Ellison, Mr. Tran. She greeted them, voice-clipped, but not unfriendly. I need projections for the northern expansion. Central administration is questioning the resource allocation again. Mara suppressed a sigh. Again, we've scaled back 3 times already. And they want a 4th, Jansen replied, her mouth set in a grim line. Apparently, the mineral yields from last quarter didn't justify our continued investment at current levels. They've never set foot on this rock, Luca muttered, pulling up the schematics for the northern sector. If they'd come see what we're working with. They won't, Jansen cut in. Not until we prove Helios 4 can turn a profit. Until then, we're just a line item they can trim when shareholders get nervous. Another tremor shuddered through the structure, stronger this time. A warning light flashed on Mara's console. Power fluctuation in Sector 2. She reported, opening a communications channel. Sergeant Farouk status report. The grainy image of Sergeant Omar Farouk appeared on the nearest screen. His dark features were partially obscured by a dust mask pulled down around his neck, and the stock of a standard-issue pulse rifle was visible over his shoulder. Nothing serious, Captain. Just a coupling that broke loose during the tremor. My team's on it. Behind him, Mara could see members of his security team, all 20 of them, the colony's entire defensive force, assisting technicians with repairs to an exposed power conduit. Despite the military downsizing that had left New Dawn with a skeleton security detail, Farouk maintained discipline and efficiency. The sergeant had arrived with scars he never discussed and combat experience he rarely referenced, but his loyalty to the colony and its people had never wavered. Keep me updated, Mara instructed, and Farouk nodded before the connection closed. 20 security personnel for a colony of 300, Jansen said quietly. Another budget cut we couldn't fight. Headquarters keeps saying we're so far from shipping lanes that we don't need a full security complement. Let's hope they're right about that at least, Mara replied, turning back to the manifest. As security chief, she knew better than most how vulnerable they truly were. 50 years after the Great Expansion Treaty, humanity had pushed far into the galactic arm establishing outposts and colonies on dozens of worlds. Some flourished. Others, like New Dawn, clung to survival by their fingernails. Outside the command center, the thin atmosphere of Helios 4 whistled through uneven seams in the colony's architecture. The planet had shaped its inhabitants just as they had attempted to shape it. Brutal storms carved out a survival of the fittest culture among the colonists. Resources were guarded jealously. Innovation was prized above all else. And in Mara's security briefings, the term acceptable casualties had been redefined to a standard that would shock Earth's comfortable billions. She ran a hand through her short, dark hair and turned to a different screen, reviewing the defensive systems. Automated turrets designed to repel indigenous predators rather than sentient threats. Emergency protocols that hadn't been updated in 9 years. A perimeter surveillance network operating at 70% capacity due to damaged sensors they couldn't afford to replace. It wasn't much, but it was all that stood between New Dawn and whatever threats the galaxy might send their way. "I need to prepare for the council meeting," Jansen said, retrieving a tablet from Mara's desk. "I want both of you there, 1900 hours." As the director departed, the lights flickered again, and somewhere deep in the colony's foundations, machinery groaned in protest. "Just another day in paradise," Lucas said with a wry smile, and returned to his calculations. Mara didn't reply. Her attention had been drawn to a subtle anomaly on the long-range scanner display, a momentary disruption in the orbital tracking grid. Probably nothing. A system glitch or debris from the asteroid belt at the edge of the Helios system. Probably nothing, she told herself again, but made a note to have the scanner diagnostics run a full spectrum analysis. In a place as precarious as New Dawn, probably nothing had a way of becoming definitely something at the worst possible moment. The council meeting had just begun when the alert came. Mara was standing at the back of the cramped meeting room, only half listening as Jansen presented their revised expansion plans to the colony's senior staff. Her communicator vibrated against her wrist, and a priority message scrolled across its small display. Anomaly confirmed. Multiple signatures. Approach Vector 227.5. She slipped out without a word, racing toward the command center. By the time she arrived, the warning klaxons had begun to sound throughout the colony. The long-range scanner operator, a young woman named Kira, whose face had gone pale beneath her freckles, looked up as Mara entered. "Captain, we have multiple artificial signatures entering the system. Configuration matches known Varathian battle group formation." Varathian. Mara's blood ran cold. The Varathian Empire had been expanding aggressively along the sector's edge for decades, but they had never ventured this far into human-claimed territory. "Confirm that reading." "Already triple-checked, ma'am. It's them. 1 Dreadnought, 3 cruisers, and multiple support vessels. They'll reach our orbit in 90 minutes at current speed." Mara activated the colony-wide communication system. "Director Jansen, Sergeant Farouk, and Chief Engineer Tran to Command Center. Emergency Protocol Alpha. This is not a drill." Within minutes, the command center had filled with the colony's leadership. Jansen arrived, first followed closely by Farouk. Luca burst in moments later, breathless from running. "Show me," Jansen demanded, and Kira transferred the scanner data to the main display. There was no mistaking the configuration. Varathian warships, their distinctive blade-like profiles, unmistakable even at this distance. 8 vessels moving in tight formation on a direct course for Helios 4. "It makes no sense," Farouk said, studying the tactical overlay. "There's nothing of strategic value here. We barely produce enough minerals to justify our own existence, let alone attract Imperial attention." "Maybe they think we have something we don't," Luca suggested. "Or maybe," Mara said grimly, "they just want to make a point. First human colony to fall to the Varathian Empire, a symbolic victory." Jansen's face had gone ashen. "What are our options?" "We have enough emergency shuttles to evacuate 60% of the colonists," Mara replied. "But the shuttles would be defenseless if intercepted. And we don't have the supplies for a sustained ground defense, Farouk added. My team can hold choke points for a time, but once they deploy in force, hours at most. Unless, Luca said suddenly, we don't try to win. We just try not to lose. All eyes turned to the engineer. Protocol Blackout 7. He continued, looking at Mara. We designed it as a contingency for catastrophic environmental failure, but with some modifications. Mara caught his meaning immediately. It could work. We'd need to sacrifice significant infrastructure, but infrastructure can be rebuilt, Jansen cut in. Lives cannot. Explain this protocol. As Luca outlined the plan, Mara watched the blinking icons representing the Vorathian ships grow larger on the display. The battle group had accelerated. Their arrival time had been reduced to 60 minutes. So we have a 7-minute window, Jansen said when Luca had finished. Either we repel the invaders in that time, or the colony is lost. Yes, Mara confirmed. But every colonist survives. That's the priority. Jansen took a deep breath, then nodded once decisively. Do it. Implement Blackout 7 immediately. And may whatever gods still watch over humanity have mercy on us, because I doubt the Vorathians will. Mara turned to her team. Kira, sound the evacuation order. All civilians to emergency shelters. Sergeant Farouk, deploy your security teams at the primary choke points. Luca, begin power diversion to the shield matrix. As the command center erupted into activity, Mara allowed herself one brief moment of doubt. 7 minutes to save 300 lives against an Imperial battle group. The odds were astronomical. But then, humans had never been particularly good at accepting the odds they were given. The first Vorathian drop pods streaked through Helios 4's thin atmosphere 53 minutes later, leaving trails of superheated gas in their wake. They slammed into the dusty ground around the colony's central dome, with concussive force, their ceramic outer shells fracturing to reveal armored forms within. Moments later, electromagnetic pulses rippled outward from each landing site, temporarily disabling New Dawn's primary generators. Emergency lighting bathed the corridors in crimson as colonists hurried toward the designated shelter areas, guided by security personnel. In the command center, Mara watched the invasion unfold on surviving camera feeds. First wave deployed. Approximately 50 shock troopers, heavy infantry configuration. Beside her, Luca was hunched over a workstation, fingers flying across multiple interfaces. Drones online. Targeting systems active. We have 43 units ready for deployment. Only 43, Jansen asked, the concern evident in her voice. It's enough, Luca assured her, though his expression suggested otherwise. They don't need to win, just buy time. On another screen, Farouk's team had taken positions around the hydroponics bay, a natural choke point between the colony's outer ring and the central habitation zones. The sergeant's voice came through the comms, steady despite the situation. First contact imminent. Permission to engage? Granted, Mara replied. Remember the protocol. Staged withdrawal after initial contact. Draw them toward the primary target zones. Understood. Farouk out. The first exchange of fire was visible on multiple feeds. Brilliant pulses of energy from the Vorathian weapons, answered by the more modest armaments of the colony's defenders. The Vorathians' armored exoskeletons made them formidable opponents, towering over the human security forces. Artificial sandstorm initiated. Luca announced activating another system. The colony's environmental controls, specifically designed to protect against Helios 4's natural dust storms, began operating in reverse. Massive fans pulled the planet's abrasive particulate matter into the atmosphere around the colony, reducing visibility and interfering with the Vorathian sensors. Drone swarm deployed. He continued launching the first wave of small AI-guided machines. Originally designed as scavengers to collect resources from Helios 4's surface, Luca had repurposed them into kamikaze units bearing electromagnetic charges. The drones darted through the artificial sandstorm with unerring precision, their guidance systems calibrated to the unique conditions of Helios 4. They swarmed around Vorathian troops, detonating their payloads against armored joints and sensor arrays. Outer fence breached. Mara reported watching as the invaders cut through the colony's perimeter defenses. Farouk's squad is falling back to secondary positions. Civilian evacuation 80% complete. Jansen added, monitoring a different set of data. Emergency shelters report optimal life support status. A tremor shook the command center, more violent than the geological disturbances from earlier. That wasn't natural, Luca said, checking readings. They've deployed subsurface charges, trying to destabilize our foundation. Mara felt a chill run down her spine. The Varathians were being more thorough than anticipated. If they detected the emergency shelters beneath the colony. "Accelerate the timetable," she ordered. "We need to draw them deeper before they realize what we're doing." Luca nodded, fingers manipulating the drone control interface. "Reconfiguring swarm behavior now. They'll pull back, create the illusion of weakening defenses." On the security feeds, Sergeant Farouk and his team executed a fighting retreat, drawing the Varathian forces toward the colony's core structures. The tactic appeared to be working. The invaders pressed their advantage, sensing victory. But as the security forces fell back, Mara could see doubt creeping into Farouk's expression. The plan required sacrificing infrastructure they could ill afford to lose. Years of work destroyed in minutes to save lives. "Sergeant," she said over a private channel, "stay the course, remember what matters." Farouk's gaze flickered toward the nearest camera. He gave a slight nod, barely perceptible, then continued the retreat. In the hydroponics bay, a Varathian energy blast struck a critical irrigation junction. Water vapor exploded outward, momentarily obscuring the camera feed. When visibility returned, 2 security officers lay motionless on the floor. "Casualties," Jansen murmured, marking their names on her tablet. "They knew the risks," Mara replied, her voice tight. She had trained with every member of the security detail. Knew their families, their dreams, their reasons for coming to this harsh world at the edge of human space. Their sacrifice won't be wasted. A new alert flashed across the main display. One of the Varathian cruisers had moved into low orbit directly above the colony. "Incoming transmission," Kira announced. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Let's hear it," Jansen ordered. A guttural voice filled the command center, translated by the colony systems into accented but understandable English. "Attention, human settlement. This is Commander Sauron Krell of the Varathian Empire's 7th Battle Group. Your defenses have been assessed and found inadequate. Surrender now, and you may serve the Empire as subjects. Resist, and you will be eliminated." No response, Jansen instructed, before Kira could open a return channel. "Let them think our communications are down." Commander Krell continues. Kira reported, monitoring the incoming signal. He says, shell operation will begin in 2 minutes if we don't surrender. Orbital bombardment." The command center fell silent. Mara exchanged glances with Luca, who nodded almost imperceptibly. 5 minutes since first contact," he said quietly. "We're entering the window." Mara straightened her uniform jacket, a gesture that had become habit during moments of decision. "Initiate final phase of Blackout 7. Authorization Ellison Alpha Tango 69. Luca entered the command and a new interface appeared on his screen. A simple countdown timer, 60 seconds. "All personnel have withdrawn to secured positions," Farouk reported over comms. "Varathian forces have penetrated to Sector 3. They're converging on the central power distribution hub." "Perfect," Mara replied. "Exactly where we want them." As the timer counted down, she thought about the true nature of Protocol Blackout 7. It had begun as a contingency for catastrophic pressure loss, a way to protect the colony's population if the structural integrity of the habitation domes failed. But Mara and Luca had secretly expanded it, preparing for threats both environmental and external. Throughout the colony, carefully concealed self-destruct charges had been wired into every dome's foundation. Not powerful enough to threaten the underground emergency shelters, but more than sufficient to vaporize everything at surface level. The ultimate deterrent never revealed to Central Administration or even to Director Jansen until today. Surrender deadline approaching, Kira warned. 30 seconds until orbital bombardment. Launch the Doom drones. Mara ordered using Luca's nickname for the final wave of modified machines. Luca activated the command, and on the external cameras, hundreds of drones rose from concealed hangars around the colony. Unlike the earlier waves, these didn't engage the ground forces. Instead, they accelerated upward, following predetermined escape trajectories that would bring them into contact with the Varathian ships in orbit. 15 seconds, Kira announced. All colonists secured. Jansen confirmed, checking the final reports from the emergency shelters. Reactor containment protocols active. We're as ready as we'll ever be. 10 seconds. Mara took a deep breath. Years of planning, countless hours of secret preparation, all coming down to this moment. See you on the other side, she said to her colleagues, and then pressed the final authorization on her console. 0. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the colony's structures began to collapse in a precisely orchestrated sequence of subterranean detonations. The central dome imploded first, its titanium composite skeleton buckling inward before disintegrating in a blinding flash. The shockwave rippled outward, triggering the charges in the surrounding structures. Varathian troops concentrated in the colony's core were caught in the cascade of explosions. Their armored exoskeletons, designed to withstand conventional weapons, offered little protection against the focused destructive power unleashed beneath their feet. Simultaneously, the Doom drones reached orbit. Hundreds of small, unremarkable machines converted into guided missiles, aimed at the Varathian ships' vulnerable points. They weren't powerful enough to destroy a warship outright, but they didn't need to be. Their electromagnetic payloads, multiplied by their numbers, overwhelmed shield generators and disrupted critical systems. In orbit, 3 Varathian capital vessels listed out of formation, their engines flickering and dying. The Dreadnought, protected by more robust countermeasures, survived the initial assault, but its weapon systems had been compromised. Only one cruiser managed to maintain full functionality, its emergency protocols activating just in time to repel the swarm. From the command bunker deep beneath the colony's foundations, Mara and the others watched the destruction unfold on the surviving camera feeds. The surface of New Dawn had been transformed into a hellscape of fire and crumbling infrastructure. Nothing remained standing. No trace of the colony's existence was visible from orbit, only a spreading cloud of dust and debris. Varathian ground forces eradicated, Farouk reported over the secure channel from his shelter position. Confirmed 0 surviving hostiles within sensor range. Orbital status, Mara asked, turning to Kira. The young operator checked her readings. 3 capital ships disabled. The Dreadnought is withdrawing to a higher orbit. 1 cruiser has engaged emergency FTL protocols they're running. A cheer went up from the command staff, but Mara raised a hand for silence. Casualties. Security teams report 2 dead, 7 wounded, Farouk replied. Civilian population, 100% survival rate. Now, Mara allowed herself a small smile. 7 minutes, she said quietly. Not bad for the weakest colony in the sector. Director Jansen stepped forward, surveying the destruction displayed on the monitors. Her expression was a complex mixture of grief and pride. We've lost everything we built, she said, but we've saved everyone who matters. Luca's console beeped, and he checked the alert. Emergency lifeboats prepped and ready. Environmental systems in the shelters will maintain for 72 hours, but we should begin evacuation to the secondary habitat immediately. The secondary habitat, a small, automated research outpost established 30 kilometers from New Dawn during the initial colonization, had been maintained as a potential refuge. Its facilities were Spartan, but it would keep the colonists alive until help arrived. Begin evacuation, Jansen ordered. Priority to wounded and essential personnel. As the others mobilized for the evacuation, Mara took a moment to watch the Varathian Dreadnought retreat. On another screen, the colony's remains continued to burn, casting an orange glow across the dusty landscape of Helios 4. The plan had worked exactly as intended. In the space of 7 minutes, the weakest human colony had eliminated a Varathian assault force and crippled half their battle group. More importantly, they had sent a message: attack us, and you lose more than you gain. The fleeing cruiser would carry that message back to the Varathian Empire, a warning written in fire and sacrifice. Mara felt no triumph as she watched the destruction, only a grim satisfaction that her people would live to build again. The colony was gone, but its heart, its people survived. "Captain," Luca called from across the bunker. "We need to move." With a final glance at the monitors, Mara turned away. There would be time to mourn what they'd lost later. For now, there was work to be done. The journey to the secondary habitat was arduous. Helios 4's thin atmosphere required the colonists to travel in sealed transport vehicles or wear environment suits for the trek across the barren terrain. The wounded were evacuated first, followed by technical specialists needed to expand the habitat's capacity. Mara traveled with the final group, unwilling to leave, until every colonist was safely away from the ruins of New Dawn. As their transport vehicle crested a ridge, she looked back at the destruction they'd left behind. The dust was beginning to settle, revealing scorched earth and twisted metal, where a community had stood hours before. Beside her, Luca followed her gaze. "It worked better than we expected," he said quietly. "The chain reaction completely erased our footprint." "That was the point," Mara replied. "Make them think they destroyed us utterly. Buy time for Central Administration to mount a proper response." The communications officer in the Varathian cruiser that escaped would report exactly what they had seen: a colony erased, a fleet decimated by a desperate last stand. No one examining the remains would suspect that the destruction had been self-inflicted, a calculated sacrifice to preserve human lives. The secondary habitat appeared on the horizon, a cluster of low dome-shaped structures nestled against a rocky outcropping that provided natural protection from Helios 4's storms. It wasn't much, but it would serve as a temporary home while they planned their next move. Director Jansen met them at the airlock, her expression weary but determined. "Central Administration has been notified," she announced, as Mara and Luca removed their environment suits. "Emergency response vessels have been dispatched from Rigel Station. 8 days until arrival." "8 days," Mara echoed. "We can manage." "They're bringing everything we need to establish a new outpost," Jansen continued. "And reinforcements. A full security contingent this time." Luca raised an eyebrow. "Nothing like a near miss to loosen the purse strings." "It wasn't a near miss," Jansen corrected him. "It was an unequivocal victory. The first successful defense against a Varathian incursion in colonial history. Central Administration is calling it a pivotal moment in human Varathian relations." "Politicians," Farouk muttered from his position by the habitat's small command console. The sergeant's left arm was in a makeshift sling, and a Bacta-patch covered a burn along his jawline. "They'll try to take credit for the plan they never approved." "Let them," Mara said, "as long as they send the supplies and personnel we need." The habitat's common area had been converted into a makeshift medical bay, where the wounded security officers were receiving treatment. Mara made a point of visiting each one, thanking them for their service and sacrifice. "What happens now, Captain?" asked Torres, a young officer with shrapnel wounds across her torso. "We rebuild," Mara replied simply. "Stronger this time." As night fell over Helios 4, the colonists settled into their temporary shelter. Resources were tight, quarters cramped, but morale remained surprisingly high. They had survived. Against overwhelming odds, they had preserved what mattered most: their community. Mara found herself unable to sleep, despite exhaustion that seeped into her bones. She made her way to the habitat's observation dome, a small bubble of transparent alloy that offered a clear view of the night sky. The stars were brilliant in Helios 4's thin atmosphere, and somewhere among them, The remnants of the Varathian battle group were limping away. "Quite a view," came Luca's voice from behind her. The engineer joined her at the viewport, offering a steaming cup. "Synthetic coffee. Barely drinkable, but it's hot." Mara accepted the cup gratefully. "Thanks." They stood in companionable silence for a time, watching the stars. "I've been thinking about the new colony," Luca said eventually. "We should incorporate what we learned today. Build the defensive measures directly into the foundation this time. No more retrofitting." "Already planning the next self-destruct sequence?" Mara asked with a slight smile. Luca shrugged. "The Varathians won't be the last threat we face out here. Better to be prepared." "Agreed. But let's hope we never have to use it again." "To hope," Luca said, raising his cup in a small toast. Mara mirrored the gesture, then returned her gaze to the stars. Somewhere out there, a Varathian commander was reporting their defeat to his superiors. Perhaps if they were fortunate, the Empire would decide that human colonies weren't such easy prey after all. And if not, well, they would be ready. 6 months later, Phoenix 4 rose from the ashes of New Dawn. The new colony was established at a location 15 kilometers from the original site, incorporating elements from both New Dawn and the secondary habitat that had sheltered the survivors. Central administration, jolted into action by the Varathian attack, had provided not only the promised supplies and personnel, but additional resources that transformed Phoenix 4 into a proper defensive outpost. Standardized turrets ring the perimeter. Rapid deploy shelters designed to withstand both environmental catastrophes and military assaults formed the colony's core. A communications array capable of reaching 3 sectors away ensured they would never again face a threat in isolation. Captain Mara Ellison, standing on the observation platform of the new command center, surveyed the bustling activity below. Colonists moved purposefully between structures, technicians calibrated newly installed systems, and a full complement of security personnel patrolled the boundaries. The colony's population had even increased with volunteers from other outposts, transferring to the legendary Phoenix 4. "It's quite a transformation," Director Jansen said, joining her on the platform. "Hard to believe it's only been 6 months." "Nothing like a common enemy to accelerate progress," Mara replied. Jansen nodded toward a cluster of engineers working on an unusual structure at the colony's center. "The memorial is nearly complete. We're planning the dedication ceremony for next week." The memorial, a towering obelisk of polished stone from Helios 4 itself, had been Jansen's idea. A reminder of what they had lost and what they had preserved. The names of the fallen were etched into its base, while its peak would bear a plaque commemorating the colony's defiant stand. "Appropriate timing," Mara noted, "considering our expected visitors." 2 days earlier, long-range scanners had detected a single Varathian vessel approaching Helios 4. Unlike the warships from the previous encounter, this was a diplomatic craft broadcasting a request for parley on all standard frequencies. It would reach orbit around the same time the memorial was scheduled for dedication. "Do you think they're sincere?" Jansen asked, lowering her voice, though no one else was within earshot. This talk of a non-aggression accord. Mara considered the question. The message from the Varathian envoy had been surprisingly conciliatory, expressing regret for the unfortunate conflict, and suggesting that both sides had demonstrated enough strength to justify mutual respect. "I think," she said carefully, "that they're reassessing the cost-benefit analysis of attacking human colonies. We were supposed to be an easy target. Instead, we cost them 3 capital ships and an entire ground force. An expensive lesson for them." "And for us," Mara added, glancing at the memorial obelisk. "Even victory had its price." The dedication ceremony was attended by every colonist, all standing in the central plaza of Phoenix 4, as Director Jansen unveiled the memorial plaque. Sergeant Farouk, now fully recovered from his injuries, stood at attention with his security team, while Luca Tran and his engineering corps formed an honor guard around the obelisk. "We gather today," Jansen began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "to remember what was lost and celebrate what was saved. 6 months ago, the weakest colony in human space faced annihilation. Today, we stand as the strongest testament to human resilience. As she spoke, Mara's attention was drawn to a flicker of movement at the edge of the colony. The Varathian diplomatic party had arrived, escorted by a detachment of security officers. Their insectoid forms encased in ceremonial armor, rather than battle gear, moved with precise, measured steps toward the gathering. Jansen, noting their arrival, concluded her speech with words that would be immortalized on the memorial plaque. "In 7 minutes, the weakest colony taught the galaxy attack us, and you lose more than you gain." The Varathian envoy, a tall figure whose carapace bore elaborate markings denoting high rank, approached the memorial. The crowd parted, murmurs rippling through the assembled colonists. Many had lost homes and possessions in the attack. Some had lost friends or family members. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Director Jansen, the envoy, greeted in surprisingly fluent English. "Captain Ellison, I am Diplomat Executor Vexorn of the 7th Imperial Sphere. I come under the banner of peace to honor your victory and propose a new understanding between our peoples." Mara stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Jansen. "Your ships came once before Diplomat Executor. They brought destruction instead of understanding." Vexorn inclined his head, mandibles clicking softly. "A decision made in error based on incomplete assessment of human capabilities. The Empire acknowledges its misjudgment." From a specialized compartment in his ceremonial armor, the Varathian produced a crystalline sphere, etched with complex patterns. "This is a treaty orb inscribed with the terms of a non-aggression accord between the Varathian Empire and human colonial authority for the Helios sector. It has been approved by the Imperial Conclave and awaits only human endorsement." Jansen accepted the orb, examining its intricate markings. "Our linguists and legal advisors will need to verify the terms." "Of course," Vexorn agreed. "Verification is the foundation of trust. But know this, what your colony accomplished in 7 minutes forced a re-evaluation that might otherwise have taken decades of conflict. You have earned the Empire's respect." As the diplomatic proceedings continued, Mara found herself standing beside the memorial obelisk, tracing the names of the fallen with her fingertips. The cool stone, quarried from the very planet that had tried so hard to kill them, now stood as a testament to their tenacity. Luca joined her, his expression thoughtful, as he watched the Varathian delegation. "You know," he said quietly, "when I first came to Helios 4, I thought it was the worst assignment in colonial space. The forgotten outpost. The doomed project." "And now?" Mara asked. The engineer smiled faintly. "Now I think it might just be the place where something important began. Not just for us, but for human-Varathian relations. For the future of colonial space." Mara nodded, understanding what he meant. Their desperate gambit Protocol Blackout 7 had done more than save the colonists. It had demonstrated that even the weakest human settlement would not fall easily, that the price of conquest would always be too high. As the sun began to set over Phoenix 4, casting long shadows across the newly constructed domes and reinforced habitation units, Mara watched the Varathian envoy and Director Jansen sign the preliminary non-aggression accord. The first such agreement between humans and Varathians in the history of interstellar relations. "A good day's work," Farouk commented, moving to stand beside her. "A beginning," Mara corrected gently. "We've bought peace for now. Tomorrow we build the strength to maintain it." Together, they watched as colonists and Varathians cautiously began to interact, examining each other with the wary curiosity of former enemies, finding common ground. The memorial obelisk stood witness to their tentative exchanges, its shadow stretching across the plaza like a protective hand. In 7 minutes, they had turned defeat into victory. In 6 months, they had transformed destruction into renewal. And now, standing amidst the fruits of their labor, Mara allowed herself to believe that perhaps the next chapter of their story might be written not in the language of war, but in the more complex dialect of peace. The weakest colony had proven the strongest lesson: underestimate nothing, sacrifice what must be sacrificed, and always prepare for both the worst and the best that the universe might offer. As darkness fell over Helios 4, the lights of Phoenix 4 shone defiantly against the night, a beacon visible from orbit. A message to any who might look down upon the small outpost on the edge of human space. We are here, we endure, and we are stronger than you know.